Good evening. Welcome to the Hemophilia Federation of America's inaugural Pride Project Research Webinar. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Wendy Owens, and I'm the HFA's Director of Research. Also on the line tonight, we have HFA's Program Director, Janet Chupka. Before we get started, we'd like to go over a few helpful webinar tips. We certainly welcome your participation and questions during the webinar. However, your audio will be muted during the entirety of the webinar, as this helps limit background noise that may disrupt the presentation. If you have a question, we encourage you to type a question in the question box located at the bottom of your control panel. I will address your questions at the end of the presentation. Tonight's presentation is our Pride Project Webinar 1, What are PCOR and CER? As I said, I'm the Director of Research for HFA. I also was the principal investigator on the CHOICE project, and I have been working in the bleeding disorders community for about 7.5 years now. With that, let's get started with our webinar. First, this funding acknowledgement. This webinar is funded through a Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, Eugene Washington PCOR Engagement Award. We're going to start off answering, what is research? Research is defined as a systematic investigation into and study of materials and sources in order to establish facts that reach new conclusions. Let's go deeper into that idea and see if we actually explain research in straightforward terms. My first question is, who performs research? Well, you do, we all do, and we do it regularly. We conduct comparisons based on the results, and we use our judgment to act accordingly. So you may prefer Colgate over Crest, or Hunt's over Heinz, or running over CrossFit, or Tylenol maybe work better for you than Advil. So you these products, and you compare products all the time to see which ones work better for you, and you draw your own conclusions based on the evidence you create. You're doing research. We're going to talk about two types of research today. And another type of research we're going to talk about is a comparison sort of research that's focused on informing patients so that they can make decisions as to what's best for them, like weighing pros and cons, for example. Consumer Reports is a good example of this. For some, if you're looking at a car, reliability is more important than owner satisfaction, or power may be more important to gas mileage. This research is weighing the pros and cons of various options based on your needs. So here's a question. Why is research important to you? Well, certainly data is important to us in decisions that we make, long-term decisions like buying a car and buying a house, what school we want to go to, what medications we take. But here's a question. For healthcare providers, why is it important to them? They may be asking, which medication is most effective to treat different kinds of bleeding disorders? The patient would ask, with the variety of treatment products available, should I consider making a product change? And then insurance companies wonder, is regularly scheduled use a factor to prevent a bleed better than treating a bleed when it happens? So everyone has questions coming from a different perspective. And that's why we need to do various types of research. Now, what's happened recently is that the patient's voice has started to really matter in research. And why was this? The Accountable Care Act, which was passed in 2010, gave rise to the focus on patient-centeredness. So this whole idea of the patient being the center of medical care. And the goal of this is putting the patient at the center is to increase the focus on the patient and really give them a voice. There is the need to remove inconsistencies in care. So if you listen to a patient, you listen to another patient, you listen to another patient, you can provide consistent care across the board because you've been informed by a variety of people. And you can talk about with them what works for them and pass it along to another patient. So this interaction with patients helps providers make better decisions about care. It improves their care techniques. It integrates useful technologies into the care. So we're going to talk real quick about patient-reported outcomes, and this is where this patient-centered idea comes from. A patient-reported outcome is what puts patients at the center of care. So patient-reported outcomes really is information, but the difference is that it comes from the patient about the patient's health condition without any interpretation or changes made by a clinician or anyone else. So it's directly from you. Now, what's important is when you incorporate this information into healthcare visits, they can fuel conversations and provide means to lead to joint decision making. So really including the patient in this process. So this idea of patient-reported outcomes is very important to what we'll be learning about and discussing in the PRIDE project as we look at working with you, caregivers, patients, and other stakeholders to integrate you and train you in participating in the research process. So here's the question though. Can we just look at patient-reported outcomes and have them stand alone? Is that the best way to do it? I would order say no. As we know, they are complementary to what are called biological and physical examinations. So the three work very well together. A physical exam, the doctor talks with you, maybe looks at the location of your bleed, for example, or other injury you may receive, and then you discuss it with you, and you may need to have blood checks, titers, factor levels, and so forth. So all of this together allows someone to provide you with the best care and allows you to make the best decisions about your care or someone else's. So because HFA values the community, values your input, your thoughts and ideas, and we believe that you are experts in your own disease, we applied for what's called a PCOR engagement grant. And that's what's paying for this webinar right now and our training we're doing throughout the year under what we call the PRIDE project. So our PRIDE project is patient-centered research for innovation, development, and education. We received a $250,000 grant from the Patient-Centered Outcome Research Institute. And you'll see PCOR, as they say it, a lot of times in our presentations. So our goal is to train all communities in PCOR and CER, and I'll be explaining exactly what those two things are later in the webinar. Now, stakeholders, I want to make sure everyone understands that this is just not caregivers and patients. This includes researchers, doctors, nurses, social workers, pharmaceutical companies, home care companies, and others who touch somehow the process of treating the bleeding disorder patient. So please don't be surprised if you see a researcher from a pharmaceutical company participating in one of our sessions or leading a webinar, for example. Everyone's involved, and that's the goal of the Patient-Centered Outcome Research Institute. They really want to make sure that patients have the opportunity to interact with all of these stakeholders and provide their voice. So we'll be doing in-person presentations, webinars, and online education, and we will provide you with the opportunity to engage researchers directly, whether they're from a university or an institute or from a private corporation. And you can actually discuss new projects with them. That's what we want to end up with. Again, so for us, HFA's research is community-driven, community-centered, and community-focused. So here's what we'll do. Training and education in the community in two types of research. Our long-term objective is to accelerate the paradigm shift to patient-centered care, treatment, and research by training our community to participate in research in meaningful ways, which means not just taking a survey. We want this training to result in capable and confident lifelong PCOR and CER participants who have a positive impact with those with bleeding disorders. I really want you guys to help us make a change. So let's look at our first type of research. This one is CER, comparative effectiveness research. This harkens back to the slide where we were looking at different catch-ups, different types of workouts, and different toothpaste, for example. It's really a new name for research that's been around for a long time. The evidence is generated from research studies that compare drugs, medical devices, tests, surgeries, and other ways to deliver health care. And it's patient-reported outcomes are an integral part of CER. So what we're looking at really is answering the question, what works best, X or Y? Again, making a comparison. Now, as I mentioned, everybody gets involved. So we have the patient, we have pharmaceutical industry, government, providers, all part of the research that we intend to do with you guys at HFA. Understanding treatment disease impact for patients makes it possible for comparative effectiveness research, CER, to support the delivery of high-quality patient care. So this is what the Patient-Centered Outcome Research Institute says about PCOR, Patient-Centered Outcome Research. Helps people and their caregivers communicate and make informed healthcare decisions, allowing their voices to be heard in assessing the value of healthcare options. So think back to the idea of consumer reports, the value of healthcare options. One healthcare option may be more valuable to you than it is for another person, but that's based on your personal needs and personal preferences, just like a car, for example. So these are the purposes of PCOR. Assisting patients and everyone else making informed health decisions, advancing the quality of evidence about how health conditions can be prevented, diagnosed, treated, and monitored, and looking at subpopulations, and then getting the information out there, this idea of disseminating information in hopes that people will be able to use it to make better decisions. So here's some questions, for example. What are my options? What are the potential benefits and harms of those options? Maybe it's treatment. What can I do to improve the outcomes that are most important to me? Again, think about the car. Gas mileage may be more important than power. Given my personal characteristics, conditions, and preferences, what should I expect to happen to me? So looking forward. And how can clinicians in the care delivery system they work in help me make decisions for my healthcare? So really, this type of research and looking at the results of it will allow patients, well, this is the expectation, to be able to have informed discussions with their healthcare providers. There are some challenges to these two types of research. So here's the question. What are the best methods for conducting PCOR and CER research? Are they surveys? Is it medical testing? Is it gene sequencing? And here you go, because research has to be acceptable to multiple different parties, regulators, physicians, payers, industry, and investors, and patients. So a variety of methods of research can apply in these cases. So as we move through our webinar series and we move through the training in these two types of research, we're going to be discussing different ways to conduct research for different reasons, for different ends. And this is information that we want to discuss with you, but we also want you to generate ideas. So the things that's very, very important, maybe talking further with the community about this, is the dissemination of the results. So you're delivering healthcare, you're identifying gaps in the care, you're researching for answers, and you have to disseminate evidence. Well, you get that evidence out there, and it may be in a journal article, a magazine, a YouTube video. What's the best way to do it? Now, you may put it out there, but here's the challenge. Just because the research is done and the data is available to support decisions doesn't mean people will use it. So my challenge to our community is, how do we do it better? Please think about that, because you know best how to communicate this information and how people, once it's disseminated, would make use of it. So you see 45% follow guidelines, 55% don't follow guidelines. How do we really change that and make that number 100% following guidelines, so that they're actually using all the work that people do to improve their own health or someone they take care of? So we've talked about PCOR, we've talked about CER. These are the two types of research that we'll focus on in our following webinars. And we're going to talk next in our training webinars about why PCOR and CER are important to patients, caregivers, healthcare providers, and other stakeholders. And in this discussion, we'll engage you and we'll want your ideas. And then we'll get deeper into, in the following webinars, exactly how you engage with researchers. What are the steps? How do you develop a research question? And go from there. So questions we'll answer are, why is it important to compare drugs, medical devices, tests, surgeries, or ways to deliver healthcare? What methods can be used to conduct PCOR and CER, and where stakeholders fit in the research process? How health conditions can be prevented, diagnosed, treated, monitored, and managed PCOR and CER? And how do PCOR and CER integrate into self-care, caregiving, clinical practice, disease management, etc.? These are questions, and these are big ideas. And it will all come down to eventually, at the end, when we're looking at closing out our training, coming up with a research question, finding funding for that research question, developing a research plan, and executing on it. We hope you will join us in this journey, and we look forward to your contributions. I'd be happy now to take any questions people might have. Well, if we have no questions, I want to thank you very much for your, oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say thank you. So far, nothing has come in. I don't know if we want to wait just another minute to see if there's anything, in case people are typing.
Okay, great.
So there is a question that came in, Wendy, and it is, when will the next webinar be?
So our next webinar, as I recall, will be in September. Is that correct, Janet?
Yes, that is correct.
Yes, so next webinar will be in September. We are kind of skipping through the summer months in hope of giving as many people possible the opportunity to participate and attend. We will have a recording of this webinar available on a link to the webinar from our research pages and other locations. We'll also post it on social media, and people will be able to access it on our YouTube channel.
Okay, great. And there's another question that just came in, and it says, besides the webinar, what other ways can I learn about research?
So we will have, at HFA at least, we'll have, in addition to our webinars, we are going to have online materials. We'll have articles in our Dayline, which is our newsletter. We also will have an online learning system, which will be part of our HFA neighborhood, and we'll have training sessions on there that you can do at your leisure, when you're ready and when you want to, and you can learn about our research as well there.
Great. Another question came in. What is the first thing we should do to begin participating?
The first thing we should do is get, if people want to participate in research, is either locate research which is of interest to them, or with an idea or several ideas for potential research. And let's work together to find a researcher to connect you to. Or you can also just contact a researcher and see if they would like to conduct the research because it is important to you.
Great. And then here's another one that came in. Will I have an opportunity to meet with people face-to-face?
Yes. So we will have opportunities at local meeting sessions at our member organizations around the country throughout the next 2 years. We also will have sessions at our symposium, both coming up next year and in 2019, where you'll be able to meet with not only patients and other stakeholders, also researchers who are actually focused on PCOR and CER research. For example, we had a researcher from Genentech at our symposium this year, and he met with 4 different groups of people, and he talked about what he does, and he talked about how he was using patient-centered outcome research in the clinical trials they've recently been conducting for their new product. So it was very interesting to hear from him as to how to integrate the patient's view into clinical trials. So there will be ample opportunity to meet with people. And if you'd like to email us afterwards, because you're going to be at a specific location, we can see if we can't make something happen.
Great. There are 2 more questions actually that I have. Do you know when the online learning research program will be available?
We're hoping in the 4th quarter of this year. That's our goal.
Okay, thank you.
We are preparing materials for that, yeah.
And then this one is, so this person has participated in surveys before, but want to know how this is different from that.
So this is different because you won't just be participating in the surveys, but you could be working with others to actually build the surveys. So as an example, when we ran our choice project in collaboration with the CDC, we had over 150 community members participate in authoring the questions that were part of that survey, with explanation that our goal for choice was to get the best, most substantive responses that we could from patients. So that meant, in this case, we had to talk to patients about how they talk about their bleeding disorders. Consequently, when we asked these questions, we really got the responses that we wanted and that could be most helpful to them. So in this process, you'll be able to work together on a team to come up with a research question, come up with a research plan, figure out how much funding is necessary, go for the funding, conduct the research, participate in the survey if it's applicable to you, analysis, and then be part of the publication and dissemination of that information. So the whole deal.
Thank you, Wendy. We do have a couple more questions. So this one is, what makes this research different from the research I hear about from my doctor?
So you may hear about this type of research from your doctor. The difference, I would say, from perhaps the clinical research that's conducted, let's say data collection on blood samples, for example. The difference here is that we're collecting data directly from patients versus from a blood sample or gene sequencing, for example. So this research you may hear about from your doctor because you're going to say, patients have said X, Y, and Z, which may be applicable to you. But otherwise, this is going to be patient-centered, consequently, information that's drawn directly from patients versus that information being in any way filtered through a provider or another type of researcher. And so it's directly from the patients themselves.
Great. Are there any other disease groups who are doing this type of activity?
Yes, there's quite a few. So there are a number of engagement awards that have been awarded to universities and other institutions around the country by the Patient-Centered Outcome Research Institute. There's a list of those folks on the PCOR website, which is just PCORI.org, PCORI.org. And it will have a list of not only these engagement awards and the type of training. Also, PCOR provides significant funding for medical research as well, and other PCOR research and CER research. And our intention is to eventually apply for one of those bigger grants.
Great. Couple more here. They just keep coming in, so that's great. We've spurred some thought. So this one is, my HTC, is conducting research currently. However, when I asked to participate, I was told I didn't have authorization, especially in regards to HIPAA. How do I go about encouraging my participation with this study?
So we probably need to know a few more details about the study. And it could be that the data collected specifically in this study is identifiable to the patient. So if data is identifiable to the patient, you may not be able to be participating because you weren't originally named researcher in the project. Before a project and research is conducted, an institutional review board, what was referred to as the IRB, will look at the project and how it will be structured, the questions that will be asked, and how patients will be protected along with their privacy being protected in accordance with HIPAA. And if it has been so deemed that there will be identifiable information, then it's possible that that's why you can't participate. But I couldn't tell you exactly without knowing what the research is.
Great, thank you, Wendy. And then there's a couple questions here. People want to know how they can get a hold of you or somebody on the research team if other questions come up in their minds in the coming months, or if they have a question they'd like to discuss after the webinar. So here is our research team and the email address at which you can contact us, research@hemophiliafed.org. That will go to the three of us, and we will respond as soon as we possibly can, and as best as we possibly can as well. And we do look forward to any additional questions that you have, any thoughts that you have. Again, our focus is on you guys. Our focus is on listening to what you have to say and integrating that into all that we do. We originally ask the community what research questions we should focus on and answer, and that's what we're going to do. Follow your lead and listen to what you need. Great. Well, thank you, Wendy, for answering all of these great questions and for your wonderful presentation tonight. It was very informative.
Thanks, Janet.
And just a reminder to everybody that the webinar is being recorded, and it will be available on HFA's YouTube page probably in the next day or two. So please check back to be able to review or share with others as well. Anything else, Wendy? Any last words?
No, I just want to thank everybody for attending this evening, and please let other folks know about this opportunity and that we are focused on you and making sure that everyone has a voice and can participate just right on par with doctors and clinicians and other researchers, because you are the experts, and we really need to hear from you. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.